Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for our main event! Hosted by Eric McMahon, it's Cageside with John Morgan!
What is up? Welcome everybody to another episode of Cageside with John Morgan. I am your host, Eric McMahon. Go ahead, follow me on Twitter, _MacLife, or my co-host John Morgan at JohnMorgan_MMA. Now, last week, go ahead and check us out in the archives. You can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Look at us on grindcitymedia.com and or YouTube. Last week, we had an amazing interview with Aaron Pico. We broke down what you could expect from this crazy weekend of combat sports. Now, on the heels of that crazy weekend in combat sports, I want to bring in the man who not only watched all these combat sports, but he even got down with Shaq Diesel, the big Aristotle, the big Cactus, put big in whatever you Shaq. He got down with Shaq this weekend. John Morgan, what's up, pal?
Not much, man. It was a crazy weekend, man. There was a lot of MMA to watch and a lot of big time events. I mean, there's always, some regional action or something you might want to watch, but it seemed like, every major promotion was in business this past weekend, other than the PFL, who's doing their finals later this year. So a busy weekend. And yes, I got to do something pretty unique, man. I got to go to the Shaquille O'Neal Foundation, the event here in Las Vegas, MGM Grand Garden Arena, raised over $3.5 million for the Boys and Girls Clubs of America and communities and schools. So it was a cool event to be a part of. But yeah, to see Shaquille O'Neal out there, I mean, listen, the guy's a legend in the game, right? So to see him out there working the room and, talking to the people and just being Shaq, man. He was on stage, helping host the event and stuff as well. It was a fun weekend, very, very busy one, but a very fun one and cool when you get to, an opportunity. I'm with these mixed martial artists all the time, which is great, but, to cross over a little bit and see an NBA legend like that, it was a fun weekend.
I saw it on Twitter of what you did. And I always tell people this story. So like I've worked in the NBA. This is, believe it or not, this is going to be my 20th year of working in the NBA, working for the Memphis Grizzlies. I worked for the Phoenix Suns prior to this. And I've seen a lot of famous people. I've seen a lot of freaks up close and personal, right? Shaq, I say there's three people that I have been in pure awe of just looking at. And Shaq is one of those three. You can't imagine the size of this human until you are up close and personal with him. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's insane. Yeah, my wife got an opportunity to take a picture with him. It just looks like it's crazy. The size difference between them is incredible. 7'1", towers over the room, and man, just was an absolute athletic force. When he was playing, obviously I loved watching his playing days from all the way back at LSU. Actually, at my mom's house in Dallas, I have to find it, but I know I have a Sports Illustrated with him on the cover at LSU. So the two-handed dunk. I mean, the guy was just a monster. But now what he's done, post-career is amazing. I mean, the guy has done extremely well for himself in business and, of course, is doing a lot to give back to the community. He's got a house out here in Las Vegas, so he's giving back to the community here. His son's about to play ball here this year. So pretty cool. It was a unique event, man. It was fun to be a part of.
Yeah, it looked like a really good time, and we're trying our best to do our Shaq Charles impersonations here. Maybe we can get on their level sometime. But with that being said, hey, let's kind of just dive right in. This, like you said, this was a crazy weekend in MMA. Not only you had Bellator, you had the UFC, you had ONE FC, and you had Ben Rothwell, calling his shot in BKFC. And like I said, if you guys aren't watching that, it's the best value buy there is out there from a fan value perspective. But Bellator 86, you sat down with Aaron Pico. Great interview. We both said this guy is on the precipice of a title shot. Looked like he was one fight away. And then in that one fight. Take it from there.
Yeah, just absolutely unfortunate. I mean, we said it, and look, it was a competitive matchup. We knew it was going to be. I mean, Jeremy Kennedy, a guy that's kind of flown under the radar, doesn't have quite as much fanfare or fame behind his name as Aaron Pico, but he's put together a very impressive career record while fighting for major promotions. And Jeremy Kennedy was saying, "Hey, this is a number one contender fight for me as well." So very, very competitive matchup. But Aaron Pico ends up suffering an unfortunate injury in the fight and only gets to go one round. And so, this guy that is, I don't want to say been snake bit, you know what I mean? But it does seem like he's had some unfortunate kind of, moments along the way. I mean, the guy came in as this highly touted prospect, and deservedly so. The guy's got all the skills in the world. I mean, he had been on a run, and I think there's still, tremendous future for Aaron Pico, who's still, just 26 years old, which is insane. Still bright future ahead. Still, I think, future title shots in order for him. Still big days ahead of him, but it got kind of taken away from him in this one because he suffers a shoulder injury and can't continue. And it's one of the craziest scenes. I mean, if you haven't seen this highlight of his coach, Brandon Gibson, trying to relocate, I guess, his shoulder or put it back in place. I don't know what the exact medical definition is for it, but it's wild.
Okay, first of all, I've seen people re-put shoulders back into place. I've never watched somebody just just yanking on that thing. And I'm calling my wife. She's in like the kitchen. She's in the other room. I don't know. I'm saying, babe, you gotta see this. Get in here. And she just walked in. She was like, oh my gosh, and like, listen, if we're not going to say Aaron Pico is a dog, we say a lot, the word gangster gets thrown around in a way, and it gets thrown around in a way of like, if you're tough, you're a gangster, right? In the sport of MMA, you'll fight anybody. You'll do anything. You'll walk through fire, kill or be killed. I think everybody is going to have to say Aaron Pico is a gangster in this game now.
Oh, he's just sitting there stone faced, right? I mean, he's just holding his arm out like, hey, if you could just, drop my shoulder back in place, we'll continue on with this cage fight. I've got 2 more rounds left. I mean, unbelievable toughness.
What about him trying to put it back in during the fight? He's like trying to throw it back into place as he's getting punched in the face, as he's getting mat returned. I've never seen anything like that.
It's unbelievable. It really is. It just goes to show you, again, his toughness, his durability, and not just, I mean, it's just to show you his mental focus. You know what I mean? Just, again, toughness is a state of mind, and the fact that he wants to continue. I mean, a lot of people, you suffer an injury like that, immediately like, I'm out. I mean, we've seen it happen before, right? Well, people will alert the referee like, oh, man, something just went wrong. Like, I got to quit. And he's the exact opposite. He's telling the referee, stay away from me. I want to continue this fight, which, I mean, look, I don't know what that feels like, but it can't be very comfortable. I'll tell you that right now. I've never had to suffer. I hope I never do. But again, and as you said, as Brandon Gibson is kind of just yanking on it, trying to look, he's stone faced like a killer, man. Just, hey, pop this thing back in and let's keep going. Unbelievable. Unfortunate. I mean, and it goes down as a TKO loss. It has to. I know some people were not happy with that decision, but it has to go down as a TKO loss. But it is one of those TKO losses, I think, that doesn't really have like negative impact long term on his future and where we go next. I mean, I do think, Jeremy Kennedy deserves the credit, and he's the one that kind of moves up in the rankings, so to speak, and is the one that is now either potentially in a number 1 contender fight or potentially in a title fight. I mean, yes, that's the immediate future, but I don't think it impacts negatively long term what I still believe is Aaron Pico's upside.
Yeah, and kind of here's the thing. I got to give a lot of credit to Jeremy Kennedy in this. And a lot of people, I mean, we've seen bad injuries happen in one fighter go running around the cage like they won that fight. They knocked the person out when just something unfortunate happened. And when I was watching the post-fight interview, I was very impressed by Jeremy Kennedy. And he goes, I knew something was wrong. I knew I had good wrestling, but it ain't on Aaron Pico's level. And when I was mat returning him and it was getting easier and easier each time, I knew something was wrong with him. And it's just unfortunate. And from a pure competitor standpoint, I got to give him a lot of credit for, owning up to that fact that, hey, I don't know when this injury happened. I don't know if I did it to him, but I clearly know Aaron Pico wasn't Aaron Pico.
Yeah, no, you gotta like, it's kind of one of those unwritten rules, right? I mean, there's a couple of unwritten rules along the way of ways we like athletes to act and ways we want people to deal with stuff. And every fighter, to a man, to a woman, will tell you that they don't want to win a fight via injury. Now, again, as you said, we don't know exactly, was he the cause of it? How exactly did it happen? Was it, it kind of looked to me like it was a pre-existing injury, maybe something that had happened in training because everybody was all too aware. I mean, for a coach to come try to relocate.
Aaron Pico put it out on Instagram. It was either last night or this morning that he dislocated it throwing a left hook. So when he was throwing a hook, he missed and just overextended, and that's when it came out of socket. That's what Aaron Pico said.
I didn't see that message, so it's interesting you say it. But even then, it seems to me that maybe it's happened before. Maybe Brandon Gibson's just used to dealing. It just seems like something that's happened before. So anyway, but to your point, I want to say you're absolutely right with Jeremy Kennedy. Nobody wants to win a fight via injury, and even if it's something that you cause, I mean, we've seen like some of the most horrific injuries, like leg breaks and things that happen on checked legs and stuff. I mean, technically you did that, right? I mean, the most famous one at all, I think, would be, Chris Weidman, Anderson Silva. I mean, Chris Weidman checked that kick. So, yes, you did it. You deserve credit for causing that injury. But at the end of the day, nobody really wants to win via an injury. So it was class handled all the way. But it goes down in the books as a TKO win for Jeremy Kennedy, and he gets to move forward. And fortunately, it does seem like the type of injury that, hopefully does not have any long-term implications for Aaron Pico. That seems like something that can be healed up. Again, if it is a pre-existing thing that's happened multiple times, I don't know, maybe there's surgery that could be involved to help strengthen the joint. I'm not sure. But I don't think, again, at 26 years old, I don't think it impacts long-term what we see moving forward.
And Scott Coker already said he wants to see that rematch. So it looks like it's going to come down. I mean, yeah, Jeremy Kennedy is elevated, but it looks like, if it's not his next fight, this fight is going to happen again. I think it has to happen again. You have to give Aaron Pico that chance to overcome this. But before we move on, I got to touch on something because, the ref called this fight off. Aaron Pico did not quit. Right. He did not tap. The ref called the fight off. And Josh Thompson on the broadcast, I know you didn't get a chance to watch the broadcast. You watched it afterwards. You didn't watch the analyst desks.
Right.
Josh Thompson was very, very upset with the referee, saying that he robbed Aaron Pico the opportunity to continue that fight because Aaron Pico said he was okay, and then the referees didn't take that at face value and called the doctor in. So I just got to get on my referee, soapbox here. And I got to say, Josh Thompson, I am a huge fan of yours, man. Like, you are literally the only person to knock out Nate Diaz. Like, I'm taking my hat off to you. Like, but you're 100% wrong here. You are 100% wrong. I am a referee. I'm ABC trained. I'm certified. I'm licensed in many, many states. I've reffed 1,000 fights. I have one job. Well, actually, I got two jobs. Call balls and strikes and look after the safety of the fighters. That is most important. I make no distinction whether it's a world title fight and or an amateur fight. I mean, 2 degrees I will, whether how much damage, but when we clearly know there is an injury, guess what? I'm not a medical professional. That ref in California is not a medical professional. He is going to have a medical professional look at it and then take his advice. And that's all I got to say about it. You got anything to add, John?
No, I think you're spot on. And I think you're coming at it from 2 different perspectives, right? I mean, Josh Thompson, while he is an analyst, he's still a fighter at heart. And I think he's going to have that fighter's mindset, which is, I'm okay. Please let me fight. But it's because of those fighters' mindset, or precisely why the officials have to be the ones to get in there. Because these athletes, again, in this sport, to me, the toughest human beings on the planet, man and woman, they will go. Nobody wants to be, have their night ended because of an injury. They'll say, no, I'm fine. I will fight through this. But what they must understand is that those in charge of officiating are in charge of athlete safety, and they don't want any long-term damage to be occurred. As you said, still just 26 years old, right? Live to fight another day. Don't go out there with an injury that can conceivably give even further long-term damage and impact your career negatively moving forward. Sure, nobody wants to take an L, but don't think about just that one night. Think about everything moving forward. I agree with you. I think that the referee did exactly what is in his right. Obviously, the doctor came in and gave an opinion as well. And I know that it's unfortunate. And I know that, most fighters are going to have that mindset that Josh Thompson does. That's what makes them so great at what they do. But you do have to understand that, those that are in charge of officiating the sport and regulating the sport, they have to put the athlete's health and safety first and foremost, even over competition.
And before I get off my soapbox, I got one more thing to add to this. Is I think that referee did a fantastic job. And the reason I think he did a fantastic job is he did not call the doctor in first. He didn't say, doctor, get in there. He let the corner try to put that shoulder back in socket. When it was clear it was not back in socket, and Aaron Pico said, F it, I'm going to fight with my arm out of socket. The referee, being responsible, said, okay, now timeout. Let's have the doctor look at it. So, hey, for anybody giving that ref or that doctor some crap, hey, man, you're looking at this game in the completely wrong way. And I think the way you said it is our job. It is his job to protect himself from himself. And, moving on. I guess nothing left to say. Moving on. But, hey, Aaron Pico, you're a dog, man. Jeremy Kennedy, you're a dog, and I can't wait to see it. And I think you showed class in handling it. But if that wasn't crazy enough, let's get into the co-main event. Spike Carlisle, AJ McKee. The first minute and a half of this first round was some of the most hectic fighting I've ever seen.
Chaos, absolute chaos. And that's what Spike Carlisle brings. That's why this matchup was kind of intriguing. I know a lot of people kind of scratched their heads a little bit and said, wait, AJ McKee, why is he fighting Spike Carlisle? You know what I mean? This is this is one of the pound for pound best in the entire organization. You know, this is the former champ that's moving up to a division and trying something new. But we expect him to be a little higher up the rankings. Or why isn't he, fighting for a title or a top contender? Well, it's because, A, you wanted to let the guy get comfortable in the division, but B, Spike Carlisle is exciting. He's always going to come in and put on a show. That's what he does. He's done it throughout his career. He's must-watch television, and he made it must-watch television here. Absolute chaos. As you said, eventually, AJ McKee is able to control things and slow it down a little bit, but madness to start.
But if you want to talk about somebody who, no matter what, is not going to stop, Spike Carlisle is that guy. There's a lot of guys in this game built that way, and he is one of them. Not only does he come out, Kung Lee style, just, high yan from 10 feet across the cage to start. I thought he damn hyperextended his knee because he was reaching that kick so much, like right out the gate. Yep. I was actually worried about it. And then they just start trading, and he catches AJ in that first exchange. He uncorks on him. Now AJ's a gangster, and he just took it like a champ, ends up knocking Spike down. But you're not going to get a more exciting minute and a half than you got in that fight.
The guy's fun. The guy is must-watch television. I said the alpha ginger. I mean, come on, man. He's a showman. You know what I mean? And I think that's such a big part of this sport of mixed martial arts that makes you memorable. To me, it kind of embraces that Japanese philosophy, right? Where it wasn't always just about wins and losses. Not that he's not going out there trying to win fights. Of course he is. As you said, he had some effectiveness against AJ McKee, who's one of the absolute best fighters pound for pound on the Bellator roster in the world, period. But Spike Carlisle goes up there and makes it entertaining. He's a personality as well, and I think that's a big part of this sport that you have to remember something else. Of course it's about wins and losses. Of course it's about moving forward and trying to move up the ranks and trying to be a champion and all those things. But it's about entertainment as well. You can't win every fight, man. You just absolutely can't. That's how difficult this sport is. But if you can entertain, if you can make it fun, if you can know that people, hey, when you fight, I got to watch you fight, man, that can earn you a very long career and a very lucrative career as well. And I think Spike Carlisle is kind of forging that path where it's like, look, I will fight anybody, but I'm also going to be entertaining, entertaining on the mic, entertaining in my showmanship in the cage. And that's what he does. But again, I, as much credit as I do want to give to Spike Carlisle, because I think he's fun to watch, just got to give credit to AJ McKee as well for handling it and then putting in the performance they did. And, we'll see where his future lies. There's a trilogy that may need to happen at some point down the road, but AJ McKee's the real deal, man. He continues to be an absolute stud for Bellator.
Well, you kind of stole my segue there because AJ McKee phenomenal. I got to go back to Spike really quick. He reversed position in every round when he was just getting beaten. And he reversed position in every round. That's amazing, especially against a guy so high level as AJ McKee. But AJ McKee, he looked like AJ McKee. Once everything settled down, he looked like a guy who was in control of every second of that match. And he looked like he could finish it at any second of that fight. But what really struck me as interesting is when Big John was interviewing him after the fight. And he says, hey, what's the deal? We have a Grand Prix at 155. Are you going to be in that? And he goes, hey, you know what? I'll win another $1 million check and I'll go win that. But Scott Coker, I'm not going down to 45 again unless there's a belt attached to it. I'm not taking fights at 45 just to take fights at 45.
And I think that makes sense. You know what I mean? I think, obviously he's getting a little bit older in his career, and that weight cut is probably becoming a little bit more difficult for him along the way. And, hey, listen, we're seeing a lot of that. We've touched on this before here a little bit about weight cutting. And, as you and I well know, it's kind of part of the sport, but it's also kind of not a great part of the sport. You know what I mean? And if you're not, robbing your body of that hydration and trimming yourself down, to in very drastic ways sometimes, you could be a little bit more healthy, a little bit more pleasant. And we hear about it a lot where guys will move up a weight class in their career and say, man, that was the best thing I ever did. And I wish I would have done it sooner. And I think that's where AJ McKee is at. And you said it. I think the circumstances line up correct. We know now that there's a lightweight Grand Prix coming up, $1 million on the line for the tournament winner. Why not go chase after that? I don't think he wants to go down to 45 for any of the other fights. And, it works out okay for some of those featherweights down there as well. There's still some very competitive matchups there. So I think it kind of makes sense for him to stay at 55, unless, of course, you have that trilogy at some point, which we'll see. I don't know how much longer Patricio is going to be around as well. Hopefully that pans out at some point.
Well, that remains to be seen. But segueing again, you set me up perfect for these segues. I don't know if you plan to do it, but you do it. So Patricio Pitbull, Adam Borix, nothing was going to stand up to Aaron Pico's arm coming out and getting ranked back in. Nothing was going to stand up to Spike Carlisle coming out to Real American, Hulk Hogan's intro music, and then acting like a lunatic the entire fight for AJ McKee just to look fast. Nothing. There's no main event on earth that was going to like top what just happened. And let's be honest, Pitbull and Borax, it didn't wow anybody. Pitbull did what Pitbull does. He does not care about the boos. He is going to just close the distance, systematically fight at his range, and make people look foolish, kind of.
Yeah, and listen, I think there's something to that. There's I guess there's two kind of ways to go about it in your career. We just praised Spike Carlisle and said, hey, you're not going to win every fight, but hey, if you can be entertaining, that's something. But when you are champion, if you can remain at the top of that weight class, I mean, those paychecks matter. You know what I mean? And sometimes you might not be able to be the most entertaining because you're not going to put yourself at risk and put that belt on the line and risk that. Normally these contracts are set up so that if you lose the title, your pay goes down. You make less money when you're not a champion. Now, I don't know that specifically with his contract, but I'm just saying that is a typical thing that happens in the sport. So, to protect yourself as a champion means a lot, and even if that means not necessarily being the most exciting fighter at all times, but fighting intelligently and fighting smartly and not putting yourself at risk. Sometimes you have to do that when you're in those positions. And Patricio Pitbull is in that position as well as, probably the Bellator GOAT, right? I mean, if you're looking at it, I mean, that guy's done more than anybody in the promotion. So, as you said, not exactly a barn burner, but, fighting intelligently, staying champion, and continuing to add to his legacy. And yeah, sometimes, man, those boos will come in, but those people booing you, they paid to be there, and so they deserve the right to express their opinion. But at the end of the day, those people are not directly paying your bills. The organization is, and your contract is, and you got to stay there, and you got to get those wins and losses, and you don't have to fight necessarily a specific way at times if you're in that position.
And those people booing you are the hometown people of AJ McKee, the guy who you quote unquote maybe controversially beat in the last time. So, let's add that into the mix. But I do want to say that Pitbull, we talked a lot about this in the weeks leading up to that Boric's flying attacks, his flying knees could come into play. And you can tell how much of an intelligent fighter Pitbull was, because every time he did that, he uncorked a right hand and put Borax, maybe not getting hurt, but in very bad spots where, historically speaking, those attacks from Borax put other people on the defensive and not Pitbull.
Yeah, he was well prepared. I mean, he knew what he was going to face. I mean, as we mentioned going in, look, Adam Borax had completely earned his right to be there, right? I mean, he had picked up some very key victories. He's tough, and he's still good. I mean, there's still a future for Adam Borax as well. He's a young guy. He's still got a bright future as well. This just definitely wasn't his night. But as you said, Patricio deserves credit. He was well prepared, knew exactly what he was going to be facing, knew the tendencies, knew the strengths, and dealt with them all well, and just fought and executed an intelligent game plan. Again, not an all-time classic that you're going to go back and watch over and over, but effective nonetheless, and retained his title against a very, very tough challenger.
All right, moving on. I mean, I think we all said, but like Bellator, great 2 weeks of fight from Bellator. I'm always going to tune into a Bellator card. Their promotion is getting better and better. And you know what? They're stacking, they're not as often, but they're stacking these cards, which I really, really dig. But let's move on to the promotional leader, UFC. They had UFC Fight Night from a banned John Morgan Apex Center this week, and I guess it was just Facebooked out, right? Before we even get into it, I got to hear the inside on this. Did you know it was that the Zuckerberg was going to be in the house? I mean, it was the worst kept secret, first of all.
Yeah, I mean, we had definitely heard that's what was happening, but we couldn't get anybody to confirm it. Nobody would say anything about it. When I asked Dana White about it at the Contender Series the previous week, he was like, you guys have been working hard. We're just going to give you the week off and, enjoy it with your families and all that. So it was wild. We couldn't get anybody to confirm it. And to be honest with you, I mean, obviously we know a lot of people that work kind of in and around the UFC that didn't really know either. They were kind of in the dark about it. So it was kind of wild. So we knew, but we didn't really know what was happening. We didn't know if it was a Meta/Facebook event. Were they testing some type of technology? I mean, what exactly was going on? But as it turned out, it seems like, well, I'm sure some business was discussed along the way. It seemed like it was just kind of a private event for Mark Zuckerberg and 10 or 12 of his closest friends. It was a kind of a wild scenario. It worked out okay because that meant I got to go to the Shaquille O'Neal Foundation's event. But it was kind of weird to have no no real public invited in, no media. It was not something we see very often. So I'm looking forward to talking to Dana White about it the next time, and just kind of, now that it's happened, see what he'll reveal. But we'll wait and see when that happens.
Well, I think what stole the show was Zuckerberg's wife cringing at you can clearly tell that this is maybe one of her first main exposures to this, and every time a big strike was landed, I mean, it's gone viral by now, so I'm sure a lot of people have seen it, but her cringing and oohing and just like like as an old dog in this game, seeing that almost like gives me some pride, you know what I mean?
It's funny, but what's wild is cool. I got to sit in that environment a few times, because obviously during the early stages of the pandemic, I mean, there was nobody in there, right? It was a handful of media. And so I got to sit in an environment like that where there is no crowd at all. And I will say this, when there's no crowd, there's no other sounds, when all you're hearing is like the impact that those blows make, the punches and the kick, and you can really like hear the sounds and almost feel them, because there's not all that extraneous stuff around you. It is a little bit more intense. It's not quite that intense where she was just reeling back and, oh my gosh, in horror. It was kind of a funny sight to see, but it is, well, I will say this, if you've never done it before, it is intense to see it that up close and personal.
And that's why I love being the third man in the cage is I have to temper my fanboy in me. And very early in my reffing career, there'd been some vicious shots, and I'd go like, oh damn, like as the ref, and then like I've kind of learned to channel that. But to your point, man, when you are up close and personal with these like just stellar athletes throwing blows at each other, it's another wonder of the world that people can put their bodies through it.
It really is. It's a sport that we all love very much, and it's an amazing athletic competition. But you do have to remember, at its core, I mean, there's violence happening in that. It is hand-to-hand combat, and then every now and then you get those stark reminders of it with just, what these men and women are putting on the line in there. I mean, they are really putting their health and safety on the line, and financial reward attached to it, of course, as well, but for our entertainment as well. So you kind of have to balance that out at times and realize that, man, this is serious stuff, man. And like you said, when you're up close and personal, man, it's pretty incredible what these athletes put themselves through.
Well, what these women put themselves through in the main event of that fight night, it was a pretty good fight. I mean, it was a tale of two fights, right? We had a great striker versus a world-class grappler. Striker won.
Yeah, Yan Xiaonan looked fantastic against Mackenzie Dern. I mean, Mackenzie showed off her grappling skills, had her in some very difficult positions. And that's why I thought, to be honest with you, I was predicting Mackenzie Dern to win this fight by submission, because while she doesn't have the greatest takedowns of all time, I just knew that she was going to have an opportunity to go into the clinch. She's not adverse to just walking up to you and grabbing you and pulling you down into guard, which she did a couple times during the fight. Mm-hmm. And because once she does that, she's incredibly dangerous in the submission game. But Yan Xiaonan has been training with the Team Alpha Male crew out there in Sacramento, California, and I think, to be honest, showed her growth in this fight, man, because she got herself into some bad spots, but was able to work through it, survive. And because of that, when she got things on the feet, she was able to show her striking skills, and she got the decision not here. Majority decision, but a win nonetheless, and a key victory for her, where, like I said, where not only does she get a win, which is important, but I think she also showed a lot of improvement. So she showed her development and how much better she's getting, whereas before we kind of looked at it and said, that grappling, man, that's going to be a problem moving forward. Now you look at it and you go, okay, she's cleaning things up in there. So now she's not going to be threatened in those positions. And so a good result for Yan Xiaonan, to say the least.
It begs the question, what is a 10-8 round, right? Because if we're going to be going, I have to go off the rule set. As a referee, there's nothing else I can go off of. Now, luckily, I don't have to judge sometimes. Like, I think that's almost a harder job a lot of times. Mine is not subjective. My role is not subjective. Judges, subjective. But under the scoring criteria, it's got to be a 10-round must system. And then it's either 10-9 versus 10-8, or in the rarest and rare circumstances, can be a 10-7.
Yeah.
But if that round 5, where Mackenzie Dern has her mounted in the first 30 seconds of the match, stays there, multiple sub attempts, probably landed, and not joking, 100 punches. Now, albeit not hard, but 100 punches. What is a 10-8 round? Because in a 10-8 round, that fight would have been a draw.
Yeah, and one of the three judges had it that way, so that's why it was a majority decision, right? So one judge did give. I mean, the judging on this fight was totally locked up all the way along the way, right? Yan Jianan won 3 and 4, Mackenzie Dern 2 and 5. All three judges had it that way, but one judge had that round a 10-8 in round 5. Had the other two gone suit, or even had one more gone suit, we end up with a draw. And to your point, I mean, the definition of a 10-9 or 10-8 round, I should say, it says winning a round by a dominating advantage. This is according to the criteria, reflected by a significant duration of domination combined with damage that significantly diminishes the opponent's ability to compete. That earns you a 10-8. It's what I tend to see, I believe, is that a 10-8 round through striking seems a lot more easy for judges to identify and award, because somebody is landing a lot of punishing blows and maybe somebody's rocked a couple times or they get knocked down and it looks like the fight's about to be over. But it seems like sometimes when it's this grappling superiority, that maybe it's not awarded quite as frequently. And I tend to agree with you. I think that very much so. Watching live, I was on the edge, to be honest with you. I was right on the border. Do I go 10-9, 10-8? The more I think about it, the more I think 10-8 really probably should have been the score that was given there, and only one of the three judges did. And basically, it really had a significant impact on the fight. And I think that's what these judges have to realize, man. This would have been a draw had they gone 10-8. And I feel like in these grappling scenarios, when it's more about the control and the dominance, the positioning, maybe it's not awarded quite as frequently. Now, Yan Xiaonan did get free at the very end, and maybe that's what saved it from being a 10-8. But the more I thought about it after watching this back, I think 10-8 probably was the right score.
I think a 10-8 score was right, but now this begs the question, and we talked about this off air, and let's talk about it on air, because I think it's a fascinating topic, is we get locked into this criteria, the criteria of this, the criteria of that. I think the judges clearly missed the criteria, or two of the three, but it begs the question, if this was in a schoolyard, who do you say won that fight?
Yeah, that to me is kind of been my pet peeve lately. I mean, I think it's great that there's as much discussion about the scoring criteria and about the rules, because I think it needs to be an open discussion. It needs to evolve. I mean, if you think about it, this sport is really, honestly, very early in its development cycle. So things need to improve and get better. The people applying the rules need to improve and get better and need to evolve in the way. But I do feel like sometimes, as you said, it's that schoolyard criteria. Like at the end of 5 minutes, it's like, who won that fight? Like, who you would say won that fight. And that doesn't necessarily happen all the time, because we do get so locked up in the criteria. So it's this kind of catch-22, because on the one hand, we need to have clearly defined criteria. We have to have, a wording that people are following, so we know how to coach it, we know how to educate it, we know how to regulate it. But sometimes I do feel like we get so caught up in applying criteria versus just being like, hey, I know who won that fight. I know what happened here. I've seen this, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of times. I know what happened here, and we don't necessarily apply it correctly. Again, it's those 3 Ds, right? It's the domination, it's the damage, it's the durability. So it's the duration of it as well. So I think that this qualified as a 10-8, and it just didn't get done this time.
Well, and as they always say, the judging criteria is 3 things: striking, grappling, and octagon control. You know what? I'm glad she got the W, because I think she earned that W. But by criteria, in that, going back to that it should have been a 10-8. It's just I can't take that. I can't take that away from Mackenzie Dern. I understand why she's emotional about it. She had a big emotional, I'm sorry if I disappointed everybody type Instagram post, but man, that was a hell of a fight. They both showed great durability, and it was just, from a fan, it was fun to watch.
Yeah, I hated to see that emotion, because I thought it was a very competitive matchup. Like I said, I thought it was a really, really close fight. And so to see how heartbroken Mackenzie Dern was tough to see. I guess the one thing that I spoke to her about it earlier in the week, hey, have you ever thought about, your jiu-jitsu is so good, just only focusing on that. And like don't worry about tuning up your striking. Don't worry about trying to get things better and be well-rounded, because you're such a specialist in this one area. And she did say, look, because if you think about it, she was in some very good positions, but wasn't able to get the finish. And hopefully she at least takes out of that is, yes, you have this incredible, some of the world's best jiu-jitsu, but people have been able to escape it. So maybe if you really just, tune in on that and fine tuning this so that when you get people in those positions, they don't get out of them. They get finished every time. And she did say, I need to be a killer in those positions. So, maybe that's something she can take out of it, that just positional dominance isn't enough. But when I get in these grappling exchanges, I got to make sure that people don't get out of them.
Well, I think only maybe her last 2 fights are the only time anybody ever got out of them. But, she's a special athlete. She's always one fun to watch because she'll stand and bang with anybody, even though it ain't her specialty. But let's talk about ONE FC, right? We talked about Amazon Prime, Friday night, prime time. What a fun card this was going to be. And this was a fun card. You had the Pride lady yelling the intros. You have, the great production value. Not to mention, this was one banger of a main event.
It really was. It really was. Look, we knew going into it, it was going to be a fun one. Like you said, I mean, the whole ONE Championship package right now, I feel like they're flying high right now. They're in North American prime time with these Prime Video cards, which is great because you're getting an audience to watch it that wasn't able to watch it before. In the past, and they still have some shows this way, but their shows will be at like 5 a.m. on a Friday morning or whatever. And it's just hard for a North American audience to watch that, even a hardcore fan. So now more fans are getting exposed to it, and it's a great overall product. As we said before, it's fun because you got Muay Thai in there, you got kickboxing in there, you got submission grappling, and you have MMA as well. And this MMA main event, Zhang Jingnan and Angela Lee, we knew was going to be a fun fight. They've had 2 fights before. This was the trilogy. Both of their other fights were very competitive, very entertaining. So we kind of knew going in that it was going to be a great fight. Didn't know how great it was going to end up being. Thought it was almost over early on. I mean, Zhang Jingnan came out on fire and was hurting Angela Lee. But Lee is durable, man. She is tough. She's unstoppable for a reason, and she kept moving forward. She kept going there. Herb Dean was on the edge of stopping this thing. He was taking a step forward, but he didn't. He let her fight out, and she continued on. And by the end of it, Angela Lee was the one with momentum. Ultimately comes up short via decision. Phenomenal fight. Angela Lee was hoping for champ status. She'll still be able to go back down to her normal weight class and compete there. But this trilogy ended in Zhang Jingnan's favor.
All right. So we go from one scoring criteria in the UFC to another scoring criteria in ONE FC. ONE FC, for those who don't know, it is not broken down by round. It is broken down by who do you think won the fight. Now it's regulated almost kind of the same, right? So it's striking, aggression, grappling, control of the fighting space. But when you're judging it as a whole, I had a problem with the judging in this fight. I'm gonna admit it. I guess I'm just being a little hypercritical on judges today. And when Angela Lee is hurt very early in the fight, I'm always going to take something back from a fan as like a schoolyard fight, right? And she's hurt very early. But after 5 minutes, she controls the fight for the last 10, in my opinion. And so that begs that it's surging one way. You overcame early adversity, and then it surged the complete opposite direction, and she pushed the pace. She controlled the exchanges. She landed the bigger shots. What do you say? What say you? Who do you think won that fight?
It's interesting, right? Because if you go by ONE Championship scoring criteria, then the proper decision was given here in the fact that they award who was closest to finishing the fight. And I just mentioned it, Herb Dean was literally hovering over them on the ground and kind of like taking those little steps in and would back up. He was about to stop the fight. So, Zhang Jingnan was the one who nearly ended the fight in the first round. But I tend to agree that, to me, how do you take that one moment and then throw away the remaining 20 minutes, that happened in rounds 2 through 5? And I don't think that should be done. So according to ONE's criteria, I think the right decision was issued here. I think it's just one of those ones that, again, they've got a unique scoring criteria on their own, and the way they do it, they judge in the totality of the fight, which I think is a very difficult thing to do. I think it's very difficult for judges to remember and to weigh evenly what happens throughout a full 25 minutes, even a full 15 minutes for that matter. I think it's very difficult for those things to be applied equally. Angela Lee has come out since and said, hey, I think we need to review the way things are done here. I think there's an opportunity to change this. And just hopefully it evokes discussion, because I do think that there might be a way to do things, still awarding things the way they do in terms of rewarding who is closest to finishing the fight, but maybe doing it on a round by round basis. Whereas, hey, yes, you were certainly closest to finishing the fight in round 1, but I had the advantage in 2, 3, 4, 5, or whatever the case may be. I think there needs to be some value in that as well. So in short, I think the right decision was issued here, but I think this may be one of those matchups where you go back and say, like, are we really doing things the right way? Is this the best scoring method possible? Because, if you talk to Chatri Sitchitong and the people around One Championship, look, they are passionate about martial arts. They do want this thing to be the best product it can be. And so maybe there is, I think that involves, constant self-evaluation, looking, hey, are we doing this the right way? Or is there something we can tweak to make it even better? That's what Angela Lee is calling for. And I hope they're at least open to discussing it and to reviewing themselves. Because I think that's, and this is in all walks of life, honestly, Eric, but it's like when people just think, hey, I'm right, you're wrong, my way is the best. You know what I mean? That's just not good for growth. And it's not good to continue to improve things. So hopefully they'll at least be open to reviewing and taking a look at it and seeing if there's ways to improve.
Well, what I am grateful to ONE FC is that they are just putting on a fun night of fights. I mean, you have a Muay Thai wrecking machine in, I think, our show, Fairtex. She is twerking down to the ring, dancing in between rounds, and then going out there and just throwing hands like with the best of them. It was just a fun night of fights. It's a fun way to spend a Friday night.
I do. I love it. Like I said, I'm really, I've always enjoyed the One Championship product. Again, they kind of harken back to those Pride Glory days, where they do the big stage setup and, it's a show. I mean, they're putting on a big show. I mean, their entrances are massive and all that. And again, I love the fact I love the fact that you get to see some Muay Thai, some kickboxing, some submission grappling. It's different. It gives you something different. And it's a whole different group of athletes. You know what I mean? You're seeing the world's best grapplers who may not want to compete in mixed martial arts, but just love submission grappling, Brazilian jiu-jitsu. You're seeing these kickboxers that are amazing. That are phenomenal at what they do, but maybe they're great in the striking arts and they just, grappling's not really a thing, but we can still see them perform. So I love it. And again, you're seeing it in prime time, these Friday evening shows on Amazon Prime Video, which, I mean, at this point, who doesn't have Amazon Prime? I mean, you got to have Amazon to live these days. So, most people have access to this. I think it's good. I don't think One Championship has ever been in a better position than they are right now.
And listen, from we talked about, you can run the gamut of, type of combat sports they have in that. But if we're going to talk particular MMA, what a game changer knees to a grounded opponent is. You can watch in the MMA, you can watch stateside here in any of these promotions. One person turtles up. They turtle up to regain their wits, to kind of fight hand control, to fight a choke. You cannot do that in ONE FC because guess what? You are going to get your head kneed into the third row. And I think it was very prevalent on Friday night. There was a lot of fights where people got turtled up, and you're finding the most unique angles to throw knees on the ground. Amazing.
I like it. Listen, it's one of the rules that in the unified rules wasn't allowed, that did happen back in Pride. And I understand that, soccer kicks is another one. The soccer kicks to me is a little too much. I do understand that just doesn't look good. And that's where, somebody's on the ground and you kick at their head like a soccer ball. You know what I mean? That to me is the one. But exactly what this does with the knees to the head of a grounded opponent, it sounds like, oh man, that's really dangerous. But what you see is it just forces that opponent to move because they can potentially be kneed there. It's not like we're seeing these, just devastating knockouts from knees to the head of grounded opponents, because what happens is you get there, and as you said, in that turtle position, instead of staying there because you can be kneed, it forces you to transition and move to another position. And that just keeps the fight moving. It keeps from getting in those stalemate positions sometimes that you see. So I like that rule. One Championship is eyeing events in the United States next year. And they've got a couple of commissions around the country that have said, hey, we'll allow that rule set here. We will allow you to adopt that. Those knees to the head of grounded opponents will be there. So we'll get to see that stateside sometime next year. But I agree with you. That is a rule change that I do find beneficial to the sport.
Hey, it makes it fun. It's impossible to stall in ONE FC. And they'll dock you 10% on the first time. They ain't giving you many warnings. They're like, hey, yellow card, 10% of your purse. Get going, guys or girls. So look ahead, UFC Fight Night 212, Alexis Grasso versus Vivian Araújo. What can we expect there?
It's a big matchup. Listen, these are two kind of fighters that are just outside of that title contention that'll be looking to make a big step forward here. It's a week and a half away, man. It's crazy. We got this upcoming week with not much major MMA going on, which is wild considering what we just did. Well, I will say we do have CFFC on Saturday night. I'll be on the call for that. So if anybody wants to log in, UFC Fight Pass, will be at Parks Casino in Bensalem, Pennsylvania this Saturday. So we got to wait till the following week for this card between, as you said, Vivian Araújo and Alexa Grasso. It's a big one. It's a big matchup in that division. Again, fighters that are just outside of title contention right now that are trying to make a step up and to be in that number one contender spot. So it'll be another one. It'll back at the UFC Apex. Hopefully they'll let me in this time. We haven't heard that Mark Zuckerberg or anybody else is kicking us out. So hopefully we'll be there on Saturday, October 15th.
I totally buried the lead too. I have my little run sheet. I'll even show you. I got my little run sheet here about what we're going to talk about. And you know what? I totally glossed over it. We talked about it in the open. You brought it up last week about just what a fun product, a value buy. Ben Rothwell made his debut at BKFC this weekend. And he finished it off in 16 seconds?
Man, got it done quick. Ben Rothwell is scary. Something I didn't even realize until I saw the weigh-in results come in the day before.
291.
That's right. So no weight cutting. This has been Rothwell just, doing what he wants to do, lifting some weights if he wants to, not having to deplete himself down to that heavyweight limit in MMA of 265 pounds. Just looking absolutely massive, and came out there and got this thing done quick, and then got on the microphone as well, and then gave his signature ghoulish laugh and said, "You ain't seen nothing yet." It's pretty wild. Ben Rothwell, since he signed with Bare Knuckle, it was one of those ones that was surprising, right? Because he was still under UFC contract, so it wasn't even one of those things where you're like, "Oh, well, I know Ben Rothwell's a free agent. I wonder where he'll end up." No, just out of the blue, we're like, "Hey, by the way, Ben Rothwell is foregoing his final fight on his UFC deal, and he signed with Bare Knuckle." And it's like, wow. But as soon as I heard that, I thought, this could be a good fit, man, knowing the way this guy likes to fight. And sure enough, man, he went out there and put on a damn show. Got the thing done in quick fashion, and I think he's going to be able to do some big things in BKFC, which, as you said, man, it's $4.99 a month. They have done some pay-per-views along the way, and I think they're going to continue to try to do, some one-off events here and there. But for the most part, it's $4.99 a month for this subscription package on their app, and usually they'll have at least 2 events a month, and yeah, it's growing, man. They're getting some names. They're getting some recognizable properties in there. Mike Perry's been doing big things over there. Chad Mendez looks unbelievable over there. So it's another kind of unique, different spin on combat sports, and another way for these athletes to make some money and get paid, which is great.
And if you just for all those guys out, for all those fans that like the Rock'em Sock'em Robots, this is for you. And like I said, it was in the height of the pandemic, like the shutdown. We're in the complete shutdown, and I knew about bare knuckle fighting, but I didn't know about bare knuckle fighting. And being an official in the state of Mississippi, bare knuckle fighting came to Mississippi in a small town because it was one of the only places that would have a bare knuckle event. And I was sitting ringside, and I was a judge. And I've judged boxing. I've done a lot of stuff, and I sat there in the first fight. I went, "Oh damn, oh damn!" Because if you want to talk about a glove hitting a face and Mark Zuckerberg's wife sitting cageside, and the reaction there, that reaction when flesh knuckle is hitting face, and you're seeing it split open, it's a whole different thing. Now it's all superficial. Let's keep that there, but it is next level.
It's crazy, man. It's it's a 2-minute rounds, so obviously the fighters can be a little bit more aggressive and know that they're going to have a gas tank to go the whole way. It is. Look, I'll be honest with you. In the beginning, when they first launched, I was like, I don't know about this. Am I going to be okay with it? Much less are other people. Bare knuckle.
The guy who covers this for a living, I don't even know if I'm okay with this.
It was weird. I was like, are we going backwards? What are we doing here? And I was a little worried that but I will say, look, there's no question about it. There are more cuts in this. You will see some blood because it just splits open easier. But to your point, superficial type damage, not the real damage. Honestly, that's being is you have to be really careful with your punches. I mean, you can break your hand very easily without. Remember, that's why gloves were added. Gloves were not added to protect people's heads. They were added to protect people's hands because your hands break. But it forces you to be a little bit more careful in your shot selection and where you punch and how you punch because you don't have that padding to prevent, and you have to be careful not to break it. Because in mixed martial arts, you can break a hand and now you can still throw elbows and knees and maybe you can grapple it. You don't have that here. You lose a weapon. That's big. So, there's definitely some cuts and some things that may be a little bit more on the surface, kind of unpleasant and look more quote unquote violent. I mean, let's be honest, combat sports is a violent sport, but at the end of the day, I don't think it is. You know what I mean? I think, and you're seeing these athletes talking about it as well, especially, even Ben Rothwell admitted it before. I talked to him before, and he's like, man, the training is so much better for my body because, where did the injuries in training occur? Which, by the way, for anybody that doesn't know, the injuries always happen in training. I mean, yes, a little bit happens in fight, but 95% of all injuries happen in training. And on top of that, it usually happens in grappling exchanges, to be honest with you, man. You talk to people, it's in wrestling and it's in submissions, in these grappling scenarios where a knee gets twisted the wrong way or an elbow post the wrong way or whatever. It doesn't happen when you're hitting a heavy bag. So, a lot of these athletes are saying, man, I'm finding the training, I think I can extend my career by doing this because the training's not as hard on my body. So it's an interesting alternative. It's another one out there. And again, $4.99 a month. I mean, they'll do like 1 or 2 pay-per-views a year, but for the most part, I mean, I'm looking at their schedule coming up. You've got another one. They're back in action October 15th as well. And then, in November, they've got November 5th, November 18th, and November 26th. So you got 3 different events that you can get in there. I mean, that's a $150 an event for November. You know what I mean? You can't beat that.
Yeah, my wife, it pisses my wife off because I get done watching UFC and I go straight to bare knuckle. You know what I mean? But hey, listen, it's just, I'm built this way. What can I say? Hey, we're wrapping up here with our latest edition. We are only 3 weeks away. UFC 280. Charles Oliveira is on Makhachev. I don't even think we need to get down. I just want to get everybody juiced up because in Abu Dhabi, 3 amazing fights. You said UFC is just loading pay-per-views at this point, so that's why these fight nights are more from the bottom up instead of from the top down. But any chance you're going overseas for that?
I'm not making the trip this time. I'm working on somebody that's going to be covering it for me. That they'll be freelancing over there. Look, it's a phenomenal card. I'll just be honest with you, man. I'm trying to spend more time at home if I can, and those trips are long. I'm trying to spend more time with my kid while I can. Obviously I've got a 10-year-old son and I'm trying to cut down on my travel a little bit when I don't have to. But that does not quell my excitement for this card. And listen, I mean, we got time. We'll talk about it before then. It's a loaded card, and it's kind of cool because it's a unique scenario in the fact that it's in prime time over in Abu Dhabi. So what does that mean for us? It means it's a Saturday afternoon, even a Saturday morning card. I think the prelims in Las Vegas start here at 7 a.m. So you wake up and put on a cup of coffee and and start watching the fights early in the morning, which I'll be honest, I like because that means you get in all the action, and then you can still have your Saturday night free. As you said, you got wives who are like, why is every Saturday night filled with you watching fights? Well, this one you can still watch the fights, and then you can still go have some dinner on Saturday night, go to a movie, do whatever you want to do.
So what's the barometer for John Morgan going to an event or not? Like I know pay-per-views, if it's in the States, are you going, you there?
Yeah, that's it. Basically what I'm trying to do at this phase of my career is I'm going to be at every domestic pay-per-view. It's just those international trips, man, because it turns out to be a longer trip because it takes 20 hours just to get over there. So you got to end up leaving like Sunday, the day, before, and then you don't get back. So it ends up being like a 9 or 10 day trip. And as much as I love the card, it's made, fortunately, the UFC is phenomenal. They'll get me the interviews with the people that I need to have interviews with. They'll help me out with getting the content that I need from on the ground. So the international ones are tough. The Singapores, the Abu Dhabis, just because it ends up being, like I said, a 9 or 10 day trip instead of a 5 or 6 day trip. And then on top of that, the jet lag when you get back has you wrecked for a couple days. So I'm no less excited. And there's no place I'd rather be on fight night than sitting cage side and being right there. And then, in the press conference afterwards and talking to these athletes after their spectacular moments. But yeah, the far flung ones that a younger John Morgan was more than excited to go and be on this adventure. I'm kind of trying to dial those back a little bit these days.
Completely understandable. My wife is gone if I take too long going to Home Depot. So you going away from and I have to travel, like with my work with the Grizzlies, I got to travel here and there, and it just gets much at our stage in life, kids, family, it gets much. I guess, especially, but modern technology, you're basically there.
That's it. It's nice. We can make these things happen. So it's great. Like I said, the UFC is phenomenal in trying to help me out and get the content I need without having to travel all the time. I did it for a long time, man. There were times where I was on the road, 35, 40 weeks a year or whatever, going to different events, and my wife put up with it for a long time. But yeah, it is funny, man. You start to realize as you get a little older what is most important. And look, man, my kid's not going to be in the house for many more years. So I want to try to maximize as much of that time as I can while he's here.
Well, wrapping up here next week, we'll be going over UFC Fight Night 212. And then I think that's kind of when we're going to have to start diving into UFC 280 because it is a stacked card. Go ahead, listen to us, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, watch this show, YouTube, grindcitymedia.com, John Morgan _MMA. I am E_Mac Life for the dad of the year, John Morgan. I am Eric McMahon, and we will see you next week on Cageside with John Morgan.